流连当头，自有高照。6月28号的天马行空由我恩慈，
我是威尔。那在今天呢，我们要讨论的这个课题呢，就是这个私立学校。其实很多人呢对这个私立学校呢都应该不陌生了。
是的。
为什么？因为它越来越普遍了。这个私立学校，就比如说这个怎么说呢？有好多读中算是一个私立学校，
是
有好多这个只要是说你不是这个官方资助的一个学校呢，基本上都能定位为私立学校。但是呢，私立学校它有些课程呢，它是根据了这个所谓的这个政府所制定的一些课程教学课程啊，这个教纲呢你必须是跟住在走的。
应该说有在细分不同的教科书的内容吧。
是没错。那当然有一些私立学校呢，它这个教科书的内容呢，可能就是完全是私立的，完全不一样，或者根据国外的，比如讲像 international school 这样子的一个国际学校呢，他们都是根据的是一个怎么说呢？国外的一些教程，有些是对跟美国的教育制度，有一些是跟英国的教育制度。当然我还没听说过有跟法国的教育制度的吗？也没有，
应该没有吧？
没有。跟日本的教育制度呢？
好像倒是有的
啊，有吗？那跟印度的教育制度呢？
这个我就倒是不知道了。
跟中国的教育制度呢？也没有听说过，对不对？
没有。我想是，如果是一些像是因为为什么会有一些日本的教育的程序，是因为有一些日本人在马来西亚生活，然后可能那个群体够大，已经足够于开一间学校，是让这些学生进去上课。
但是我们看到今天的国际学校呢，它不是为了一个族群而做的，是吗？我们就不知道。是为了
商机而做的。
对，是。所以呢，就是我们要请问的，就是我们今天的这位嘉宾了。这没错。
介绍一下我们的来宾好。
是当然我先要转一转这个频道了。I have to shift my channel to English now. Okay. Yeah. All right. So we're proud to have Dr. Gerard. Okay. Should I call Dr. Gerard or Gerard? Gerard, right? Dr. Gerard. Okay. He's the principal of the HELP International School, which is going to start in January 2014. Okay. Hi, Dr. Gerard. Just say hi to our. Yep.
Hi.
Yeah. So basically, can you tell us just as a start at the starting point? Okay. What is the international school or private? Or I should call it this way: private educations. Okay. Can you explain more about the private educations?
First of all, Will, thank you very much for the invitation to come in and share my thoughts on your channel.
Yes.
Private education basically is an option that parents have outside of the public school system. So these days you would have private schools that run the national curriculum, or you would have international schools that run basically either the American program, the British program, the Australian program, the French program. So, different international curriculum all over the world.
Oh, actually, we have French program and Australian program here.
Well, that's basically for those French expatriates who are living here in Malaysia. So you actually have a French international school. You have a Japanese international school, and of course, most of the other schools are run using the British national curriculum. So those will be more the English-based programs.
I see. So what's making a difference compared to the Sekolah Kebangsaan, the national sponsored or maybe national schools?
I think one has to look at the different trends and policies that have happened in the country.
Yes.
Initially, when people opted for the private education system, there was the perception that a lot of Sekolah Kebangsaans basically had a lot of very big class sizes. Sometimes you often hear the complaint 40, 50 in a class, not enough teachers. And so private education gave people an option of smaller class sizes, right? There's also the perception, rightly or wrongly, that the quality of teachers is different. So in private education, you generally would the perception is that teachers would be more closely monitored, more rigorous, more committed to the work that they do. There's also the expectation that in private education, I guess because of a greater sense of control, the academic standards might be higher, right? So initially, when before the liberalizing of the international schools, private education was basically for parents who wanted that other option, a greater sense of confidence that the children will perform better.
So you're trying to say that actually the private education is, I mean, the quality that you offer to the students is much better than...
That's the perception. The perception simply because, I guess, if your class sizes are smaller and then you have better teaching resources, then obviously that hopefully translates into better academic results. Yeah.
What's the reason to have a smaller class in the private schools?
Because I guess the teacher-student ratios is critical in the processes that happen in the classroom. If you have very big class sizes, one teacher to 40 students to 50 students, then how does one monitor the progress of every child? I mean, even with 25 teachers, 25 students, sorry. It's already quite an effort to really make education tailor-made and unique for every individual child, because learning is different for every child. Often you would hear in education circles the term the nameless and the faceless. There are many children or students who go through our system and people don't know them. Don't know whether, it doesn't make any difference whether they actually come to school or don't come to school, because no one really notices them. They're just a statistic in the classroom, so and then how do people really monitor the progress of every child if the class sizes are so big? And a major issue really is that do we have enough teachers for this? Because in any school, whether government system or private system, 50% of the budgets go into salaries. So and getting the right kind of teachers is the all critical factor in the quality of education. Yeah. So when you think about the kind of supervision that you would have 1 to 40, 1 to 50, it isn't humanly possible to really monitor as closely and to have the kind of tailor-made education. So with smaller class sizes, with smaller ratios, obviously that increases the possibility that you will be able to help every child based on his ability, capability, tailor-make your lessons for them, differentiate your lessons. So for those who are gifted and talented, you have what they call in international schools extension activities. Those who are lagging behind, you would have learning support for them. So whether it is in language, it is in maths and science. So lessons are differentiated, and especially if you have in the primary school teaching assistants, something that you don't hear of in the Sekolah Kebangsaan system, a teacher as well as a teaching assistant. So that high teacher-student ratio, the low teacher-student ratio, 1 to 10, 1 to 12, 1 to 15, gives parents, I guess, the greatest sense of confidence that their child is well taken care of. Learning actually is more likely to happen.
So, Dr. Justin, you mentioned that there's a perspective that's saying the teachers might be better quality, right? And is it because of the teachers get higher paid for that?
Well, again, the perception. I guess in when you are having to manage whole country's education system. And this is an argument that is there not just in Malaysia. I think even in the West, there's also that crisis of confidence in teaching, whether it's in the UK, Australia, or in America. When you are managing a whole system of education, how do you set the kind of criteria, the kind of monitoring in terms of your standards for admission of candidates into a education program? Right, and of course, more and more, the perception is that the quality of teachers that come out and go into the classrooms may not be as ready yet to handle the challenges of the 21st century. Whether they are necessarily equipped with the right competencies, knowledge, skills, attitudes. For a 21st century classroom, very much also is dependent on so many other factors, policies that happen in the country. I guess in the smaller system where it's just one school by itself, whether it's privately run or whether it's run by an education group or so forth, we have the opportunity to be a bit more selective with the kind of people that we engage or employ, whether locally or as well as teachers from abroad. So. Certainly, unlike in the public school systems, which is so huge, and you constantly have constant demands for having to fill up those numbers in thousands of schools all over the country. That certainly is a major cause of concern. So that the perception, again, whether rightly or wrongly, is that that because of the smaller class sizes and that because it's private education, parents would expect that you would be a bit more stringent in your employment of teachers coming to the school, because they are the all critical factor, isn't it, in the teaching learning process? You can't bring a school any higher than the quality of your teachers.
Actually, this is to me, I think it's not a perception. Actually, it's the truth, which means that the quality of teachers in the international school or maybe the private school, basically, if compared to the sekolah kebangsaan, you might say it's a perception of parents that their quality is much better. But I think due to what Iso just said just now, the pay probably is because the pay is higher, so you can get a better quality of teachers teaching standards in it. But now I have a question: is that if you increase your operation cost, which means that the pay, the salary of teachers is higher, definitely the students, they still need to pay the higher fee compared to the sekolah kebangsaan, isn't it? Okay, so does that mean those who having the financial, which means that it's not that up to that standards, they can only choose to go to kebangsaan, so they will have no chance to go to the international school, and which means that they cannot have a better educations. I mean, like the quality of the educations.
In reality, that's exactly what's been happening, isn't it? And not just sekolah kebangsaan, even those who opt for private tertiary education versus public tertiary education. And so that's why a lot of colleges, if not, every day you read in the local national papers that colleges recognize, if you want to provide affordable quality education, you've got to balance so many different things. Your fees can't be too high, but on the other hand, you've got this huge operating cost, because as you said, you've got to give competitive wages, because private sector people expect a certain level of remuneration. So compared to public institutions that are funded wholly or at least wholly largely subsidized, and so their operating cost is much less. But even then, even like the public universities also now have a private investment arm. They also have to bring in grants and so forth, to make sure the subsidies are lessened. So it's the reality that is actually what happens. So a lot of people who can't therefore avail of the private education, whether it's at the primary, secondary, or tertiary level, would have to then opt for the public system, and all said and done, many of us have come from a public system. In my time we never had private education, so there you go. So we all went through that, and there was a period, I guess, in our history where there was a greater sense of confidence. When a Malaysian student goes abroad, they can compete with anyone, anywhere in the world.
But is that true?
Yes, of course. I mean, even today, you get a lot of Malaysians. They take the best of our Malaysian students everywhere. They are sought after. They are able to compete in many spheres. While we still have a long way to go in terms of certain disciplines, but certainly, I think the perception of Asian students and Malaysian students is that they are very hardworking. They may not say very much sometimes in an education system abroad, but that doesn't mean they are dull or they are not intelligent. They certainly are. It's just that I guess it's more a cultural thing rather than an intelligence issue. So they are able to compete.
I want to ask, in the international school or private school, they teach in English language?
Yes.
But the Malay language, how about?
So for Malaysian students coming into international schools, Bahasa is certainly compulsory for all Malaysian students.
Compulsory?
Yes, it is compulsory. So we don't lose still that sense of identity that I guess is important as Malaysians. We need to also keep in touch with our national language.
How about the schools that you mentioned, the French, the Japanese?
Those typically Malaysian parents will not send, unless specifically you intend to, and I'm not clear about their admission policies themselves, unless you really want to go to France to learn or to learn Japanese or so forth. But by and large, I think because if the more established international schools, they already have a very long waiting list, 2-3 years sometimes. Yeah.
Okay.
But there are a lot of international schools coming up, and the reason people have opted for the newer international schools is, number one, because of the long waiting list, and primarily is the language factor. I think part of the reason, also connected with your question, why private education and specifically why international school education, it's because of the policies, I guess, of moving from Bahasa to English. To English to Bahasa back, for maths and science. So a lot of Malaysian parents are quite concerned because they recognize that English is still an international business language. You can't do away with that,
So English is a primary language in international schools,
yes, of course, yeah.
Bahasa Malaysia is a second language.
Well, second, and of course, in a lot of for Chinese parents, Mandarin is equally important.
Yeah, because now China is coming up,
right. So they recognize the business opportunities that are there, and when I speak to a lot of parents, many of them would in fact initially send their children to Mandarin schools, and then after a certain level, once they have some basic foundation, they then would transfer them to an international school, because they don't want also the children to lose out on the proficiency English language. So and now international schools need to have all of those things. Need to have good student-teacher ratios, good facilities, academic rigor, plus language for English and Mandarin, all of those things to make them competitive, really internationally, even more competitive. Because also that our Malaysian parents are actually quite well traveled. So they are,
and so kiasu. So I wanted to let my children learn everything. Basically, they are multi-talented,
multi-language.
Okay? But can I say that? Those parents who send their children to the international school, or probably the private school, private educations, they have the dreams that, or maybe they have the expectation.
Vision.
The expectation is on there. They expect their children's probably when they grown up, they're going to go to abroad to study, or maybe working, or even immigrate to other countries. So is that they're planning on that? They're not willing to stay in Malaysia. They're not willing to stay in their own country.
Some have that kind of thinking. I think, on the other hand, being a very collectivist culture, Asian families, we tend to be a very close-knit kind of thing, a group of people. And yes, while they want their children to go abroad and have all the best opportunities that that they can afford, they also would like their children to come back. Ultimately, we are still Malaysians. We love our country. While we do give our children the opportunities, we also would like to see them at some point coming back, because for many of us in a certain generation, this is our home, this is our country, there's no other country. And so hopefully, I think a lot of young people also, while they would work maybe a couple of years abroad, they recognize that there's really no place like home. Malaysia is one of the best places in the world to live in.
But the problem is, from my friends, most of my friends who go abroad, right, they rather to stay there and come back to Malaysia. So I'm not really agree with what Dr. said as well, right? Because I see that once they get used or adapted to the culture and to this environment, so they were willing to stay there. And somehow when they've seen so many things and the political things happen in Malaysia, I don't know. This is what my feelings that.
I mean, I don't think it is 100%, because I have a lot of students who have studied abroad. When they were in our transfer programs, many would go work for 1 or 2 years, maybe finish a graduate degree after the undergrad. But a huge number actually do come back. Come back to work, do come back to settle down, to because this is where their roots really are.
Okay.
So yes, there certainly is a segment of students who go abroad and they stay abroad and they eventually settle there. But there is also a good number, I think, of the students who go abroad that do come home. So it's really not absolutely a brain drain from the country, but I guess there certainly is a lot more that we can do as a country to make sure that our student talent, that the talent that we have is not lost to our neighbors. And I think there are a lot of policies and programs in place to try to make us competitive again, to make us so attractive that we will bring back a lot of our own Malaysians that have settled abroad, and then to invite them to come back home and help rebuild this country.
But what is the ratio of the races that go to the private educations? I mean, like how many percent of Malay, Chinese, and Indians?
At the moment, it's I don't really have any real stats, but I would say that the people who go into private education, as you say, correctly,
mostly Chinese.
It's more in terms of the socio-economic factors, because the fees are already pegged at a certain level, right? And so those who can afford to pay the sort of higher tuition fees, and they then will be the ones to have the opportunity to avail of that, or unless the school gives you a scholarship to study, or partial scholarship or some kind of financial aid. So it's really the fees itself already pegs the people who would come in, and those from that socio-economic standing. So mainly middle class, upper middle class would be the ones and above would avail of this. And while you do have a lot of colleges and schools that do offer scholarships to the lower income people, but there's a lot of outreach, there's a lot of community activities also with them. But by and large, those are the middle income group that will avail of private education. Yes.
Doctor, can you give us an idea like how the range of the fees, like?
For international schools, basically you're looking at 3 tiers. The top tier schools, usually we'd say fees would be anywhere from 50 to 100,000, right? A year tuition fees.
For more and more students want to come into international school or private school for studying. Do you think right?
Say again,
more and more students coming into international school or private school for studying is right. More and more students.
Yes, of course. There are a lot of students that
are. They want to go to
why do you think that the moving up?
Much more expensive tuition fee, but they would like to come.
I guess as I mentioned earlier, because of the good student-teacher ratio, the good facilities, a lot of for international schools, it's really. A lot of parents ask that question, who are your teachers? One of the first questions they ask. One of the first questions, how many expats versus local teachers? And so they recognize that if it's an international curriculum, you need also to have an international faculty, right? People who are exposed to different approaches to learning and understandings of the world. To be able to deliver an international curriculum, because the teaching learning process is somewhat different. The emphasis of education is somewhat different. It's not as assessment focused, in terms of standardized exams, but exams and testing is there. But I think the learning process is a lot more interactive. The assessment is a lot more holistic than just learning to a test. At the end of 3 years, and then you have to take your PMR or your SPM, and that determines whether you are intelligent or not intelligent. But intelligence is so broad, and so the understanding that the international curriculum allows students to really express themselves in a more holistic way, and then you are assessed. Ultimately, when we are able to excite children with learning, when it comes to having to study to a test, they will put their minds to it, because they see learning as relevant. They see learning as exciting, and then you don't have to tell them to do homework, because homework is related to life. So when the work they do in the classroom is related to real life situation, they're using 21st century tools, solving 21st century problems, and they can contribute to 21st century, provide solutions to 21st century problems, then of course the excitement will be there. But if I'm just going to learn algebra or calculus and I don't see how this is connected with everyday life, or I have to learn some content that is so detached from everyday life, and then learning becomes so dull. I look forward to holidays, I drag my feet when going to school, I don't do my homework. So the expectation when you send your child to an international school is that it must provide this excitement to learning, and that's one of the many reasons why my parents look to a good international school to provide all of those things for them.
But I think these benefits have been existing all the while. But why do you think that the number of parents sending kids to international school is increasing? The main reason increasing, is it people getting richer, or The parents realizing the importance of this education?
Obviously, yes. And as I said, the language policies that have happened, that language policy was a major factor for a lot of parents, moving them to international stream. And again, as I said, because parents want their children to be able to compete in this global village.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
So you think it's because it's more competitive? I mean, like right now, what we're doing, so they feel like sending them to the international school to get the child's more ability to compete.
That's
in the
right.
future.
Yeah, that's right.
But I just now, based on your what I say just now, Doctor, you say because the private education is the way to teach, and the curriculum is more on the related back to the daily life, right?
Yes.
But would it be a slow down process of learning? Well, what I mean is that when the teachers teach them, definitely they have a curriculum to follow, right? And if we're talking about the kebangsaan, the way they teach is basically just they feed you, all right? Just stuff and spoon feed. So that's a problem. But if it goes back to this way, I mean, more interactive, taking more times. Of course, you can have a better understanding. But compared to those, you have to spoon feed. Sometimes spoon feed you can spoon feed a lot of the information and the knowledge, speed up the process. So how do you balance up the process of learning?
You see, learning is more than just content. More than just information. The curriculum is content.
Okay.
What drives this content for you to engage with the content is that learning process, right? So, for example, if I'm going to teach you the fundamentals of grammar or punctuation, or even for mathematics, my background is really in mathematics. If I want to teach you the basic operations, how to add, subtract, divide, multiply, and so forth, I need to make sure that the approach to teaching you this is done in such a way. Of course, I need to teach you basic content. You need to understand some basic understanding of the rules and regulations of grammar and so forth. But, doing it in terms of a project, in terms of how you write, creating activities which are fun, then children can see the connection. For mathematics, I teach you consumer mathematics. I teach you how these numbers, how addition, subtraction and all is related to everyday living, where you can apply straight away. Right, and so it is not done in the abstract. For example, in the one of the things that we will be doing in the primary school is using this curriculum called the International Primary Curriculum. The International Primary Curriculum is what we call a thematic. So you teach across subjects, right? So I teach you one unit of study. For example, I teach you about the rainforest. So in exploring the rainforest, I'm teaching you language, how to describe the rainforest, how to talk about your experiences as you're learning about the rainforest. So language is being done. So your grammar, your punctuations, all of those things will be corrected as you present a piece of work. You learn about science, you learn about geography, you learn about the environment, you learn about the importance of social responsibility across subjects. Then it's relevant because in real life, even for yourselves as DJs, you are multitasking, you have multi-competencies, and constantly you are drawing from those different things, and that therefore replicates what really happens in real life. Versus the more traditional, I have 6 periods for English, 3 periods for Bahasa, 4 periods for maths, and so forth, and then children don't see the connection with all of these different subjects. So, to answer that question, when young people can connect to the content of that learning, and then they feel excited about this because they're really investigating, they're really,
they accelerate the process.
Exactly. Learning is exponential. But if I'm just sitting across and the teacher is the center of my universe, not me, of course, it takes a long time to get content across. Right? Yeah. Because I won't go out of the way to go beyond this because I don't see the relevance. I don't see the connection with what you're trying to teach me.
But if that's the case, it's more on something like, I would say, mathematics, science. Okay, but how about the civic educations? More on the civic awareness, some kind of those kind of...
So when we want to teach or want to communicate or develop or cultivate, not so much teach, it's more modeling, it's more cultivating, it's more putting students through an experience of living. So if I want to teach them things like generosity, kindness, respect, there must be various processes. Many things that we can do. For example, I bring you out on a trip, right, to different types of communities around you, just to create an awareness, and then come back and talk about those things, write about this, reflect about this, do little activities to help you recognize and appreciate from an economic standpoint how different you are, and how if you see a lot of people who have less than you, what can you do? Because it hits a lot of us, isn't it? Every time you see a disaster, for example, and then you see the images of so those things come out very naturally. So as a whole school, we can do different things. We can come up with different kinds of projects that students can do where they feel that they can contribute. So we cultivate it through experiences rather than in the classroom. Okay, these are the 64, 48, 72, nilai, mumi, and then test out in an exams, and then we find out why is there so much immorality still? Because that's not the way you would communicate morality, isn't it?
Which means that if there's happened of some kind of demonstrations or protesting, so how, if the students, the teachers that encourage the student to go to participate in it, or just how the international schools education look into this demonstrating if they're feeling they don't agree with what the governments did?
I think our role as teachers is always to cultivate a sense of critical awareness of where you are, who you are. Thinking. Critical thinking. I don't think it is our role to take sides in politics. I think it's important for us as educators. We may have our own political slants and affinities, and we are in a very, in a sense, privileged position, right? But I think it would be not ethically right for us to influence and use that position of power that we have to say, okay, you should vote so and so, and you should not, vote this party, etc., etc. What is important is we, as in any democratic system, we lay down, we develop the skills for critical thinking, and you make your own judgments. We provide you with this. Right? We will play devil's advocate. If you support this party, we will. Exactly. If you support the other party, we will also play devil's advocate. And so ultimately, you need to make an informed choice based on your own process. I look at what's happening in Australia, and then interestingly watch the debates between opposition and government of the day. And it's interesting. I can differ with you. I can disagree with you. I don't like your policies, but I don't make it personal. Right? And that's something we need to learn, because respect, you talk about inculcating. If we can learn to respect one another across political lines, I think this will be a much better, healthier country.
Is it teach in this private education, which means that of course, I'm not saying that you're going to teach them, okay, the politics, you shouldn't support this, you should support this. This is more on the personal. But what I mean is that you're going to just lay it down, and spread it to others, right? So how you teach this kind of the ideas, the critical thinking?
Of course, I mean, the most basic one will be the rights of the child. That every right has a voice. Every child has a voice. Every person has a voice. Every opinion needs to be respected, and that's what we teach. We teach young children to learn how to offer that respect, to give your voice. Even if I don't disagree, I don't make fun of your voice. I don't insult your opinions. I have to agree to disagree if we really can't meet. But I respect the fact that you have an opinion different from mine. So we also avoid this concept in psychology called groupthink, right? So, and must not be afraid to articulate a difference in opinion, even if everybody else disagrees with me. And that's part of the development of democracy, isn't it? Because the whole idea of a democratic process is that every child recognizes that his individual voice is an important voice that needs to be heard. So in the classroom process, when we're having engagements in any kind of topic, every child will have the opportunity to speak, right? Whether answers right or wrong is immaterial, versus the process of sharing a thought, sharing an idea, encouraging you, drawing that out from you. And so the creating that safe environment from very, very young, therefore begins, you plant the seeds of that democratic process later on. And then at the same time, as you grow older, you develop a more critical awareness. Now, think about what you said, Is there another way of saying something like this? Are there other views that people might have? So to facilitate a process where there is disagreement in the class, and yet, on the other hand, are there some common factors that even in our disagreement, so we are teaching students principles of conflict resolution. Yeah, common ground. That's basically what it is. In all relationships, no relationship is so absolutely bad that you don't have common ground. I mean, that's the reason why we are in a relationship in the first place, because we had things that we shared together. But along the ways, we might have gone in diverse roads.
So does that mean the syllabus that teaching in the private education is quite different from the kebangsaan, or totally different? They have their own syllabus.
There's like international schools and private schools, right? Like back to what you have previously mentioned, like the international schools have their own program designed for the kids to how they do it with the activities, to learn by all this process. But there are also some private schools that they follow the government's all those programs, right? Is that how it works?
Maybe something, I think. Maybe some part will follow the government education system. Another part, the real part, follow their own school.
Oh, I should ask it this way. Is it the vision similar or exactly same with what our national education or the Ministry of Education is that fix? Which means that, okay, they want to, I don't know, just for example, okay, they want to have to nurture or cultivate a group of the youngsters or maybe the future leaders towards 2020. Okay, probably this is their vision. So, when you back to the private educations, even though it's an international school, would it be still Sam have a same of the visions with the MOE?
Not just the MOE, but when you look at any mission statement of any education system across the world, we all talk about the whole notion of holistic development of the child. Any system in the world, right? I mean, we don't just talk about producing A's. There's no system in the world that will articulate for you just one component of development. Every system in the world, so your Falsafah Pendidikan Negara that is pasted on the wall of every school, will be this, and no institution or education institution cannot will say that there's anything wrong with a philosophy that promotes holistic education and growth, right? So even with us, when you look at our the HELP International School model, we talk about 8 different dimensions, and all of that are different dimensions of the holistic, of the whole person, right? So to say it's therefore an issue of delivery. It's therefore an issue of how do we bring across a philosophy and realize this philosophy in terms of real everyday translation of everyday realities in the classroom. So maybe that's where the disconnect is. You can have a system, you can have a philosophy of education, but people on the ground can't relate to the philosophy. Our job, being a smaller system, our job is to make sure that this philosophy, this vision, gets turned into reality through the close monitoring to the types of people that come into the school that share with this philosophy, so it doesn't become lip service. So it's not a question of whether it's the same or not, because it is similar across the world. All of us talk about the development of the whole person, the idea of 21st century competencies, making people career ready, college ready in the school. But some of us are a bit more successful in delivering that than others. That's basically the reality.
Okay, if that's happened, which means that the private school, okay, they can cultivate which is the students that having the globalization's view, but compared to those who goes to the kebangsaan, they cannot have this kind of the view, and they are not cultivated in adapting to the globalizations. So you see, if compared to those students, which is majority, I mean the kebangsaan is still a majority, would it be creating some kind of not unfair situations to the rest? Since you see the competing power is so strong, the strength is quite strong compared to the kebangsaan students. So,
I guess, again, it's not an issue of whether it's fair or not fair. It's an issue of, for the powers that be, who make those policies and who implement those policies, they will have to look at their own system and say, how are we in relation to other systems that we have in our own country and across the world? Are the students coming up from our system able to compete? I'll give you a classic example. Some years ago, maybe about 10 years ago, there was this big write-up, about graduates coming up from our local universities. Yes. And they said about 80,000, 100,000 at that time. That was the figure that was quoted. Coming out from universities and can't find work.
Yeah, jobless.
Right? But there are a lot of opportunities for work. Our unemployment rate wasn't as high those days, meaning that there were vacancies. That who were these people filling up those vacancies? Right? And they said, they recognize that the people who are filling up those vacancies are those that have gone abroad. You ask a lot of employers today, between a local degree and a foreign degree, they obviously would opt for someone who has gone abroad for education, because the perception, rightly or wrongly, is just that they are more critical, they are able to articulate ideas, language communication, they are able to communicate ideas, English is better grounded and so forth. So then people realize you need to do something about this. So the powers that be, those people who make policies, then will have to sit up and say, hey, we've got a whole lot of people, and this cuts across ethnic boundaries, because everyone who goes into a public university will be stigmatized in the same way, right? That you are not as good as somebody else. But we know a lot of students who have come up from the public school system that are really brilliant, that are really good, and it's just because of circumstances that they were not able to avail of the opportunities in private education, right?
So do you think that if the Sekolah Bangsaan, the whole government education system is good enough, then the private schools are not so competitive?
I think private education provides people an option. So when there are obviously deficiencies or shortcomings, and I think there's no education system in the world that is perfect. If parents perceive the deficiency as too great and they don't want to risk that, then they will avail of what opportunities and alternatives there are. And so, like any competitor, if you look at ourselves, for example, even let's not compare private and public, even for ourselves, even among international schools, right? We have to set standards. So if we look at someone else who is offering a program, who runs a program that is really excellent, we go there to learn, because otherwise we won't be competitive. Right? So I mean, it's an open. In an open marketplace, that's basically what it is, right? In an open marketplace,
schools is increasing as well.
Say again.
The number of the private schools are increasing as well.
So I mean, because those opportunities,
indicating that the Sekolah Kebangsaan is moving down path.
I think people just recognize that there are gaps. And as a parent, do I want to wait for those gaps to be addressed? Because sometimes in a macro system, it takes a while for those gaps to be addressed. So I'd rather go to some other school that's already plugged those gaps and then make those decisions accordingly. So maybe those are some of the realities.
Talking about the numbers of the private schools, so how many of them? Do you have any ideas, or where they the population of it?
I think mainly in urban centers. So
which means that KL.
So Kuala Lumpur, so certainly in the Klang Valley, Penang, Johor. Then you would have pockets of it in Ipoh. You would get in Kuantan. So the main urban centers, West Coast urban centers.
And how about the primary school, the private primary school? Were they a lot better than the secondary school? Much more than.
I think when people move into those sort of private education, it's really run by groups of people, or people in business, or those who already have big education groups like HELP, who have this. Then you can set up branches all over the place.
And they make it from primary, secondary, and tertiary.
That's right. Yeah, from cradle to
full package.
That's right. I think that's the education model that all of us are using. Yeah.
Okay, how many percent? What I mean is that it's not Chinese, Malay. What I'm trying to say is that local, Malaysians that goes to the internet, the private school, private education, compared to those expats.
I mean, for international schools, again, because of the policy of moving from English to Bahasa,
yes,
I think a lot of schools that had initially a private school stream and an international school stream are now making it all international, because it really didn't make sense for them to continue with the private stream, which would teach the local national curriculum, because if English and Bahasa, maths and science is still going to be in Bahasa, then they might as well turn it into an international stream, and the whole system and program will be in English itself, because of the huge debate that we had at that time about the value of English and Bahasa. So because of that, it's moving therefore into international schools, and therefore for Malay, and because of the liberalizing of international schools, and Malaysians now can avail of international schooling without any quotas. You just would have most the newer international schools, you would get a lot of maybe 70%, 80% that would be Malaysian students who would avail of that, and maybe a 20-30% would be the expatriates, right? The very established schools that have been around for the last 20, 30, 40 years, they would cater more to the Eurozone expats, whereas the other international schools, I guess also because of the fees, the school fees, we cater to more Malaysian students and more Asian expats that come into the school.
I see. So I wonder, because now not only talking about the Western, which is the American and the and English as well, and British as well, but now China is growing up. Okay, yeah, they are rising. So now, how do you make this teach all these the students to adapt to that kind of the globalization? Because I know that that English will be the major or the language, the main language that you can teach, right? Medium. Chinese, the Chinese is not. So
for us, it is at HELP International. Mandarin is compulsory for every student. It is a compulsory subject.
Compulsory, which means that in
every child will learn Mandarin, and
how many hours per week?
We would allocate it based on the whatever is required by the systems that we use. So we will be using the HSK, basically the mainland China curriculum, and based on those allocations is basically about 4 to 5 periods of Mandarin per week, which is typically what you would do if you are making this as a major language that you want to learn. You just can't have it once a week like the POL classes that you usually have. And so it is on a regular basis. Language has to be learned every day
and
on a regular basis.
Bahasa Malay?
Bahasa will have to be given its due place also in the
also 4 to 5 periods a week.
Usually about that. Yeah, so that would
but
be.
If in this situation, so more and more students can speak English, can speak Mandarin, but the view students can speak Malay language. Do you think right?
The
view student, little students to speak Malay language.
Means that what she's trying to say is that there will be lesser students can speak Malay fluently, or maybe the Chinese.
I don't think learning different languages will compromise the fluency or proficiency of another. Children at a very young age have a tremendous capacity to learn, and some people are more gifted than others, I grant you that. But children at a very young age have a tremendous capacity to taking language. That's enough research to actually show that, So learning 3 languages, all of us Malaysians, usually we are trilingual. We are able to speak Bahasa, relatively fluent, English, and for the Chinese communities, you would have Mandarin or Cantonese or Hokkien, or for the Indians, they have their own Tamil or Sinhalese or what,
But from generation to next generation, so maybe Malay language is we can use it in the public place.
Well, it's certainly it will not compromise in my mind. It certainly will not compromise the position of the national language. And, because, as I said, Malay Bahasa is going to be compulsory also for all Malaysian students. I mean, there's no question about that we will give equal weightage to Bahasa as well as to Mandarin. Because we recognize, the importance of Mandarin. So it is going to be compulsory in our system.
Are they undergo the examination or SPM?
No. Well, if parents want to prepare them, to sit for the SPM, then we will do whatever is necessary for them to be able to come to that standard.
It's optional, right? Is it optional?
We will move them because in the IGCSE program, Bahasa is a second. You can take Bahasa as a second language. Yeah, it's a subject where you can take it as Bahasa as a second language. Malay as a second language.
Second language, which means that is optional.
Or first language. First language or second language, depending. So it's an elective that students will have to take. So for Malaysian students, certainly this will be one of the core electives that they have to take. They either first language or second language. Because don't forget, international school, you don't only have Malaysians, there might be expats who would want to study Bahasa. Right? Yeah. So just like if they want to study French or Spanish, they might also want to study Bahasa, because if you're going to live in this country as an expat, it wouldn't be an advantage that you are able to speak Bahasa.
I think there are more expats that are willing to learn Bahasa rather than the local, isn't it?
Well, I guess, it's what's important is to recognize the language is a medium of communication, and I've always told that to my own children. Right? If you can speak, my wife is a Filipina, and if you can speak Tagalog, you can speak now Bahasa, you can learn Mandarin, you learn English, you will be able to speak with more than half the world. Right? The whole region. I mean, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Southeast Asia. There's already 200 million people that you can converse with. Anywhere I travel in Indonesia, the dialect aside, I generally would be able to 70-80% understand what the other person is saying.
Okay.
So it's never a disadvantage learning a language. So whatever prejudices, biases we might have, or stereotypes we might have about a language, I don't think that would really be fair, because then it limits learning, doesn't it? So what we want to do in the whole education system is to expand people's views of learning and to remove those negative biases and stereotypes that we might have about any particular subject, over something else. Because ultimately, if we talk about, a citizen of the world, then what is it that you need to be able to connect with the rest of the world? And so, coming back to that question that you asked, a very interesting question. That's why Mandarin is going to be compulsory, because we recognize the growing influence of China as a major player in the world economy, and it will be a major advantage. I mean, I can see myself even sitting in beginner classes in Mandarin. So the next time I come for an interview in your station, I will be able to converse with you in Mandarin, because it's a major language. It's a major economic force, and it will be.
And the populations of China is so high.
So it's across our our local racial boundaries that we sometimes have boundaries about clear divisions left and right because of different reasons. But when you look at a language itself, it is to your advantage. I mean, if French is going to be the language of the world, if 1.5 billion people speak French, then French will be second language in the school, right? If Japanese, at one time, a lot of people were learning Japanese or Korean, simply because they are such a strong economic force, and in order to engage in that country, and if everybody else in the world is already jumping on the looking at the opportunities and saying that, hey, we will lose out if we don't, and you can't engage if you don't understand where the other person is coming from. One way of understanding is learning the language, the most fundamental, very basic way of connecting. Right? So, and therefore it just makes good education sense if you are talking about global village, and 1/3 or 1/6 of the global village is China.
So you have to Mandarin, right? So back to the Malaysian, the national education blueprint, right? So how you see the position of the private education or international school? What is the position of it, and how's the future? How is it going to expand?
I think the blueprint is interesting in terms of, one huge component in the blueprint is this whole idea of making Malaysia an education hub, isn't it? And therefore the opportunities of international education, private education really is there in relation to making Malaysia that education hub. So I think it provides us a lot of opportunities. And really, we are not only looking at ourselves as Malaysians, because if we really want to be a serious international player,
So
our public system and what runs parallel with the public system must be competitive. Then it gives parents a lot more choices.
Would it overtake the public system one day?
I mean, a blueprint is meant for that, right? And if that, the whole idea of a blueprint is to make sure that standards increase. And then when that happens, not a bad thing, because in a competitive, open marketplace, then private education has to also compete.
It has to parallel with the income or maybe the growth of the economy.
You see that happening also, isn't it? I mean, when we compare ourselves with our regional neighbors, I mean, we're not doing too badly economically, at least in the urban centers. Yeah, I mean, there are plans, not in a rural area. I think those gaps will be there in any country, really, in the world, not just with ourselves. Yeah. But when you look at those sort of situations, then really it's a question of competition, always making ourselves better, and always making sure that whatever processes as far as education is concerned, that we learn from everybody else, right? So for me, it's not so much a debate of public-private, really as a debate of what can we do to enhance the quality of learning that happens. And you notice I use the word learning deliberately. I'm not talking about education, because the core of education is learning. If learning does not happen in the classroom, there's no education.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Okay.
So that's the essence of any education system. Any education system must have a very solid learning foundation. If that does not happen, then we're all wasting our time. Then we are irrelevant. Whether it is public, private, or whatever we couch ourselves in term, international and so forth. If we are not promoting learning in the school, in the classroom, and every child, not just the bright ones, but every child, whether it is got some disability, whether he's a slow learner, whether whatever, because every person has the ability to learn, and if we are not helping him learn, then we have no business really calling ourselves a school.
Okay, so all right, so we are almost times, and of course, is there any last conclusion you want to just say to our friends?
Yes. So thank you very much. I mean, this was certainly a very engaging conversation. But I think it's
learned a lot as well.
It's a concern that I think that all of us have, isn't it? For ourselves and for the future of this country that we love so much, and we certainly want to make sure that we are able to provide the kind of quality opportunities, quality, affordable education for as many Malaysians as possible, right? And so really, for parents who are looking at international education and now private education as an option, help is one of those. Sorry, I have to take a bit of time to do it. So we do have interesting open days. There's one huge open day coming in on the 27th of July. So if your listeners are listening in, we have an open day and a preview on the 27th of July at HELP University itself in Pusat Bandar Damansara. It will be in the afternoon, and so do come and spend some time with us, meet with my teachers, meet with the senior management of the school itself, and we'll be very happy to serve with you, to share with you.
What is the age of the enrollment?
From preschool to pre-university. So
preschool to PU.
Preschool to A levels.
Okay. All right. So much appreciate to Dr. Gerard for his sharing today, and he's the principal of the HELP International School, and that will be coming.
Tuition fee for international school is cheaper. Because I can see in the international school how Malaysia people is look like in the future.
All right. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
好了，非常感谢我们这位 Dr. Gerard 这位校长，就是 HELP International School 的校长，跟我们的分享关于一些私立学院的一些资讯。那当然，我们今天也超时了，那就希望大家呢，明天就是周末了。对，也希望大家有个愉快的周末。下个星期呢，我们同样时间我们再见了。天马行空有更多的资讯带给大家，希望大家继续守住我们的这个留言台了。好，我们下个星期再见，周末愉快，拜拜。